When did you begin an association with the Society of Resource Geology in Japan? When did they become involved and encourage you to do some compilation series for them?
Well, that came because I was doing consulting work for the Japanese government. So I was working in all the Japanese islands. Some of the most fascinating work I've ever done, really. Great place to work, as you can imagine. And as a result of contacts made during all that field work, they apparently had in their budget funding for somebody to prepare a summary of discovery case histories over the previous 25 years. And that was in 1995. So
that was your first volume.
That's right. So they asked me if I would do it, and I said no, I don't think I can manage it. It seemed an enormous job. I remember answering the telephone call from Tokyo while I was still in bed at about 8 o'clock in the morning, and just the thought of it sent a shiver down the spine, really. Anyway, they followed it up with a letter. And
who was the driving force on their side?
I can't really remember the people's names now. It was a fellow called Sato-san, I think, who was the chief of the regional geology division, I think, at that time, or the geology division. So I started initially to look for somebody who could do it for them, and I asked a couple of people that I thought were probably got the right experience, and they couldn't manage it. So finally, I don't know, in a weak moment, they must have persuaded me to do it, I guess. And I think I extended the time frame, and because they had to do it within the budget year. So we reached some amicable agreement whereby I could produce this document.
And so the first document came out when?
And fairly late on in 1995.
Right. And then they asked you to do another one subsequently.
They asked me to do an update after 5 years. So in 2000, so I did that, which was a lot easier because, of course, there was only 5 years of discoveries as opposed to 25.
Yeah.
So that padded it out to 30 years. And then everything changed then. The government stopped all support for exploration in Japan, so I didn't go back to Japan to do any more work. Everybody changed, and I was never asked again. It was very, very interesting, though, that in 2009, just as Colombia was starting to open up, I was on a long road trip with Ruben Padilla, ex-BHP geologist. You probably know him from BHP.
Yeah.
And Ruben said, why don't you write another of this? Was 10 years later then. Why don't you write another of these updates on the last 10 years' discoveries? I said, no, I'm out. I'm not in touch with the Japanese anymore. And he said, well, why don't you ask companies to support you to do it? I said, no, not my style. I can't go and ask people for money. He says, if you like, I'll do it. So I said, okay.
Good old reason.
Then all this was done. We had motorcycle outriders, armed outriders, back and front.
That's with Anglo-American.
That was Anglo Gold.
Anglo Gold.
Yeah, they were first in after the FARC guerrillas started to weaken.
When Chris Loader was there.
Yeah, that's right. So, but those were still fairly wild days in Colombia. And
so that then gives you 40 years.
Yes, that gave 40 years. Yeah. So
now, rumour has it, Dick, that although you were very, very unselfish when you did those compilations and never ever mentioned if the unnamed geologist might actually be someone who you are very familiar with, but I'm just wondering if there are any cases that you'd like to sort of elaborate a bit on where you have a personal information out of that 40-year period.
The odd drill hole was placed in some of these properties, which led to discoveries. I guess.
I mean, you've mentioned a couple already.
Yeah, I mean, they of course were included in the
UN,
the initial volume.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but they were in the 1995 compilation.
Yeah. Are there any others that you quite give you a happy memory now and again on a long winter's evening?
I'm forgetting the older ones, really, to be quite honest with you. but in fairly recent times, I mean, some of these epithermals down in the Deseado Massif of Argentine Patagonia. So Esquel, we found a kilometre-long blind ore shoot there by drilling a proposed hole.